Hey there, you are listening to Coast AM. Connie Willis here with you. I got a couple friends here tonight. Joe Hauser was just on, and great job. Thanks so much. Getting lots of nice reviews coming in. It's always nice when you guys write in and you say nice things. It overpowers those other trolls that are running around, and they're real. They're out there. But love when people are positive and they write in, because normally that's just not the case. Normally, you always hear from the, negative people. They take the time and do that. But usually people that enjoy shows, they usually kind of get what they wanted. They're thankful. And then they just, either turn it off or keep listening or, just move on because they've been satisfied. They got what they wanted and they go on. They don't usually go, oh, I love that, or thank you so much, or I was satisfied. It's just the way it is. It's always been this way. I've learned that from the very, very beginning of learning radio and television and strategies and focus groups and things like that. So it's always nice when those of you that enjoy it, which is the bigger population out there, write in and say things. It's just nice. And I guess now with social media, it's pretty instant, but still it's nice when you guys do that. And I appreciate that. I think you're going to do the same with our next guest, Tom Powell. He is a 35-year veteran science teacher from Portland, Oregon, author of 3 books, The Locals, Shady Neighbors, Edges of Science. He frequently presents at paranormal and Sasquatch conferences, and recently at Montana Con. That was Hauser's. And he just completed a 4th book, and it comes out. It's due to be published in 2024. It's called Planet Strange. And you guys know one of our hosts here, one of our guest hosts on the weekends is Richard Seart, and his is Strange Planet. So that was like, hey, we'll probably help each other out there. But what it does is it examines evidence of the subterranean realm. And I'm excited about this because in my thoughts too, it's like we're surface people. What's down below? There's a lot of room down there and a lot of space down there for things to happen. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he's figured out and what he thinks. Now, I met him years and years ago. Tom, I'm trying to figure out exactly how it was. I remember you helping me at a conference. I also remember that it was your last day of teaching. And I literally went to school with you on your last day. And that's a big change in your life. And then I know that it was kind of quiet. He was gone. I'm like, where'd Tom go? Where'd Tom Powell? And that's with a THOM. He went underground for a while. He was hidden under that rock. And it was recently that I saw his name popping up and I was like, Tom's back. And just literally days ago, I was like, Tom, man, you got to come on the air with me because I absolutely love him to death because we're definitely from the same perspective of seeing things. There's no doubt about it. And he's so fun to talk to. I remember taking you as well. You were on Coast with me before, and I remember being up there in Oregon, and we went on to Clyde Lewis together, and that was fun too. So anyway, welcome back to Coast AM.
Thanks, Connie. Great to be here.
All that, and that's all I get back from you. Holy cow. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night, Tom. See you later.
Right.
How have you been, and where'd you go? What's going on with you?
Well, after a while, you kind of get tired of being the salesman for some of these topics, and I think you just put your material out there, and then you just have to see what sticks to the wall. But I don't know that being the go-to guy, the media personality, is always advancing the topic. So I just kind of let other people do it. I got enough material out there, and I just would rather do my own research than
Agreed. Yeah.
As I said, try to convince the world of ideas that are they just wear you down, you know.
I do. Like I said, we have the same perspective on so many things. Now I'm a broadcaster, so this is work. This is what feeds me. And I absolutely love what I do. And I love that it's in this subject matter. But I agree with you. I'm not here to convince anybody, prove to anybody. You know, when people say, well, if you saw this, why didn't you pull the camera out and get it? Well, that's not what you're thinking when you're there. And if you do think that, by the time you look down even a second, you're going to miss what you could have at least enjoyed and had for your own self.
And one of the things you got to stop and enjoy, of course, is family. And toward
Yes.
that end, I think one of the first things that I got to do is just a shout out to my aunt Elise Ty, who lives in New Albany, Indiana. She just turned 94, and she
Wow.
is an absolute die-hard coast-to-coast listener. I mean, she never misses a show at 94. And
I love it.
She loves your work, and I just want to sort of like recognize her, because I think for every person like this that I know of, there's probably 1,000 others, but you know, there's this one beautiful person in New Albany, Indiana, Elise Ty, who just is a huge fan of what you guys are doing.
Elise, thank you so much for being a fan of ours and listening to us. Thank you so much. I hope you are there with us right now. I'm sure she's with us. She might even be a Coast Insider and listening to it tomorrow. But anyway, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we love Tom. We absolutely love Tom Powell.
Mm-hmm. And I love Elise.
Oh,
she's
that's
my
great.
godmother. It's kind of a Catholic thing, you know.
Yep. That's great. Well, that's so nice. Well, there you go. If anything at all tonight, you got that, and that's an amazing thing. I agree with you. Family is very important. There's other things you've got to do in life. But man, when you get into this world and you get your research going, a lot of times what you experience, you know, sometimes you just got to hold it close to yourself, because you still have to process it, and it still doesn't mean that it makes any sense. Maybe it might make sense in the future, but if you start putting theories to things, you got to be careful about that too.
But it does. It changes your life in a way, because, you know, these powers do push back. And so when you're sort of like whacking the hornet's nest with a stick, yeah, I mean, you don't realize that what you're doing when you're being a researcher of this stuff. But what you find eventually is that when you study these topics, all of a sudden you realize that they're studying you too.
Yeah, they're having fun with you. Some of them, they're just having a good time with you and messing with you. Well, now, do you remember William Dranganis, who has passed?
Sure. Yes, I do. Lived in Virginia, and he's a guy who was sort of involved with the alphabet soup crowd, you know, CIA, NSA, blah, 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 FBI. But he was a super nice guy and very forthcoming, and a very big researcher of it all, who's no longer with us. But he did a lot of great work, and was one of my sort of early go-to guys as far as some of the weirder stuff that I was coming across, and he sort of helped validate a lot of the directions that I was choosing at the time. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Amazing man. Absolutely. You're right. Yeah. He was, it was interesting the way he described it to me at one point. He said, Connie, you know, when the CIA and the NSA and you said alphabet, when they need something, they would come to me. So he was the guy that knew the technology so far in advance. So, and if they said they needed something, he knew the technology enough to make whatever it was that they needed to make, being able to draw from that technology.
And I did a event in Ohio, Mark D. Worth's thing in Salt Fork, and he was there, and he brought some of his alphabet soup friends, and I made a bunch of jokes about CIA and everything, and how that really, as paranormal researchers, that we're basically spies. We're trying to learn about beings that don't want to be necessarily outed, and at the end of the show, they through him just said, "We really enjoyed what you did," and they actually gave me some CIA tchotchkes,
Aww.
things like that, and I was really touched that they were sort of willing to acknowledge that. Yeah, we listen to what you guys say. We're not going to necessarily come out of the shadows, but we study all sources, and you guys are doing reasonable contributions to the knowledge.
And he saw a couple while he was out with his FBI guys looking for gold with metal detectors, right? So he loved the Bigfoot world. He loved it. Now, the reason I brought that up pertaining to you is because at one point he had spoken to me about underground, and he was talking about the wood knocking, and he said something about where underground the trees and any wood knocking, because of the root system, it could really travel far underground. So I thought about you and thought about him saying that. And also, did you even have some story where you had some knocking happening and then you drove, this might even been Bill's story, but then you drove many miles away and then you heard that same kind of knocking when you got home? Was that you, or maybe that was Bill?
No. It might have been Bill too, but I definitely had one of these things. And again, as researchers, you sort of trade notes, and you do find that other people have incredibly similar experiences. Mm-hmm. But mine was that I was working up near Mount Rainier at a active site where the family had repeat Bigfoot encounters. And I will say that this was late 90s, early 2000. I confess I wasn't overly sophisticated at the time. And at the time, we heard these tree knocks in the woods, and so we just assumed that these Sasquatch were going around with sticks knocking on trees. And so we thought that might be some form of communication that was worthy of exploitation. And so darned if I didn't sit there all night long with a Louisville Slugger.
All right, go Big Blue.
And knocking on trees. And nothing happened, absolutely nothing. And I always did the same cadence, knock, 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 three things. That was my little code. And, I just really thought it was going to produce something, but it did not. And I did this for at least 6 hours. Well, it finally, close to dawn, I decided enough was enough. I had obligations, had to get home. I lived 100 miles away. And so before dawn, I drove the 100 miles, barely made it home, without just passing out from exhaustion. And the moment I got to my own property, I got out of the car, slammed the door. The sun just barely rising in the eastern horizon. It wasn't even over the horizon yet, just a glimmer of light, and knock, knock, knock. Here I get the first response of the evening at my own house. So, here I am, too exhausted to even venture back to the rear of my own property. That's how much of a zombie I was at that point in the evening or morning. But obviously they were, toying with me. They were showing a sense of humor and acknowledgement that, we knew what you were doing all night long, but how did that phenomenon travel with me for 100 miles? I was working up at Mount Rainier. I was down in Clackamas County. I still scratch my head over the implications of what that is saying, and then that is that they can travel with you somehow.
They were in the back seat.
Yeah, right. And I have talked to people who say, "Oh no, they traveled home with you." And I'm like, well, this defies conventional explanation. This is where the word paranormal starts to come into
Right.
the vocabulary, because there's no easy way to explain how the phenomenon can travel with you for 100 miles and then, acknowledge you right there in your own property. It's hilarious.
It is. It is. I try to tell people too. I'm like, they're not us. You can't think like they're like us. They don't think like us. They're not us. It's.
Well, you also realize that we're dealing with a degree of sophistication
Yes.
that is
Absolutely.
really important to acknowledge.
Yes.
The biggest mistake I think we can make is to assume a unsophistication, and then all of a sudden you come to realize that they're running circles around everything that we do. So I tell people nowadays that perhaps the most important thing that one could do if you really want to move forward with this whole, area of study is do not employ tricks or traps, but rather ask permission. However you do that is up to you. And I do believe that employing sensitives and people with communicative powers that perhaps most of us have not cultivated in ourselves, but I'm told that we all have. But
Tom Powell with us. We got to take a break, Tom. Hang in there. But absolutely right. Respect. Ask them. Don't trick. Don't toy. Don't try to trap. They're already going to know what you're doing anyway. But if you want that communication, that relationship, be good to them. Respect. Tom Powell with us. Connie Willis here. Stay with us and enjoy some more on Coast to Coast AM. You are listening to Coast AM. Connie Willis here with you, talking with my buddy Tom Powell on the line here. So, Tom, I want to bring up a few things to you that I've told you before, and it's going to lead into something for you. But I want to just bring these up again because they were just absolutely amazing, and it goes into what we were talking about. So the very first time that I ever went Bigfooting, I grew up in a haunted house with a ghost all my life, then went into the world of UFOs, and went in from there alien abductions, from there remote viewing. I mean, everything leads to another, to another, to another, to another. And at one point I was pulling in, right? And one point I was pulling in documentaries because, my trade, my world, my career, and money making is not in the paranormal, is broadcasting, television, radio, film, things like that. And I was working with a guy that was working with documentaries on the internet, and he had so I was bringing in documentaries for him. And at one point I was sent a Bigfoot amateur documentary, and from there they had invited me to go to Alabama, where there was all this activity happening, and I had never thought about Bigfoot ever, just never thought about it, just never had gone there. And I just thought, oh, okay, whatever, that's fine, that's cool, that sounds good. And when I got there, they had vetted me for hours. Pat Rance was Mark Green, Willie, Keith Tyler. Just these people are absolutely amazing. Been in this area for a long time. They said they believe there are two tribes of them, one a little nicer than the other. Anyway, I go after being vetted, truly vetted, and that's a smart thing to do. Keep your spot quiet and vet the people that go if you want activity. And the very first time I put my foot down out of the vehicle to clear, we were finding a clearing of where we were going to stay. But the second I had opened the door from the truck that I was in, passenger seat, and got out, there was what I heard was, we are highly advanced and we're everywhere. And I knew that I knew it, and I knew that I heard it, and I repeated it. And it has been true ever since. I absolutely believe that to be absolutely true. They're highly advanced and they're everywhere. And I absolutely believe they gave that to me. And it was
but when you get that, when you first step out of the car, I should think that you would also find yourself wondering whether you weren't in some way being had. This is just too good to be true. That how did they know that I'm coming? It's a crazy realization that does not sink in right away. I'm sure that it took you a few days to figure out what just happened. But they were waiting for you, and what does that say? That these things are just absolutely whatever is behind the phenomenon. It represents a sophistication that leaves us in awe.
And you're right about that, but I didn't go there with that. I just took it in and because I knew that I heard it. I knew, and I think from all my other research along the way, and it wasn't even really research along the way. These things like usually come to you, right? It's like you don't even have to chase after stuff; it comes to you. I don't know why that is, but then later,
that's actually the best approach. Although
yes.
It's the hardest thing to do, because it's almost arrogant to say, "Here I am, now come to me." You sort of expect that it's going to take more work to bring the situation to the fore, and then all of a sudden it's inviting your participation. That's not what people expect, and so it floors them, and I think it in many cases says they start to go, all right, somebody's jerking my chain here. It can't be like this, and it is not always, but the one thing I like to tell people is if you study them for a while, I mean months and years, then they start to know who you are, and they study you.
Yeah. I didn't have that thought of who's jerking me around. There's been other times I've had that where I've been around people I didn't trust, or that they would do tricks and pranks and things like that I have to weed out people, along the way. It's like, okay, I can't, because I want the real deal.
Definitely, and it forces a skepticism, which is unfortunate, because in many cases, interesting things, valid things happen, but they're too easy to dismiss, especially if you're trying to wear your scientist hat.
Throw that out the door. Hang that on the hat rack on your way in. Well, later on, that night, one of them had come up and they were shaking, I'm just going to make a long story short, but they were shaking the camper on all sides. And it seemed like whatever I said in my head, like I remember saying, oh, wow, that was another shake. Oh, maybe let's see if there's another one. And then there's another one. And then I would go, well, I wonder if I'll feel one on the other side from the camper. And then it came from the other side of the camper, and I didn't hear anything walk over. I didn't hear any brush or leaves or twigs break or anything like that. And it had said, if you unzip the zipper right here, basically it had said, then you'll see us. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And he said, well, this is what it said back to me was, well, isn't that what you came for? And we had this little conversation back and forth, but it was so natural, I didn't think anything of it. Told it the next day. Later on, when we're out there looking some more, and I'm totally exhausted through the weekend. This was in Alabama, going, holy cow, all this stuff that's happening. This is absolutely amazing. But I remember sitting in the car at one point, other people were out, and I was debating, do I keep the car on? Is that going to attract them? I don't want any more attraction. I'm worn out. This is killing me. I'm by myself too. Or do I turn it off? And then it comes up to me and I see it in the window. Oh, I'm not ready for it. And so I had said to myself, I wonder why they hide. And a voice comes back and says, because our face frightens you and that makes us sad, relating to
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I had said before, but then showing me emotion. It was amazing. It was
But so
amazing.
all of this is happening by way of what is sometimes called
Mind
mind
speak.
speak. In other words,
Mind speak.
you were
Yeah.
hearing
Yeah.
what amounts to English in your
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
and yet you cannot identify the source of this communication. And so this is a phenomenon that is I think you have to be doing it a few years before you even often consider that such things as this can happen. So for you to have it happen to you very early in your investigative career kind of suggests that they knew that you were a person who was going to evolve, and so they invested some effort. It's crazy, but the idea is that it's independent of language, but there is communication from mind to mind, and it's really awesome to not only realize that it's happening, but to have it happen to you, and it's unbelievable.
It boggles the mind. Absolutely. And it was so natural. The thing is, it was so natural that it wasn't scary or creepy. It was later on that you kind of, it all hits you and you're going, oh my gosh, I had a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think a
It
lot of
can't
mine.
be that easy, can it?
Well, I know that's what I thought. I thought there's no way this can't happen. No way. But
Well,
I think a lot of it,
you put
well,
yourself out there, and
yeah,
you try to
absolutely. In
be
the right
sort
spots.
of unbiased and
Yeah.
open, and and then it does find you with a little more regularity. Now, here's the thing: you have to be careful of what you wish for, because once you open those lines of communication, they can come find you at the damnedest of times, and you sometimes go, "Oh my God, what have I done?" They know my mental
Address.
email, shall we say.
I'm just going to send them your address. Well, I think a lot of it had to do with studying the alien and alien abduction, and how deep I went with that,
Yep.
Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, and getting deep into those conversations and into the world big time. And before that, being in a haunted house all my life where something was in it. And as a little kid scared, you develop great skills into knowing where the thing is only because you want to run from it. That's how I was. So I developed good
Mm-hmm.
skills of where it was so I could be away from it.
And then there's all these guys, Skinwalker Ranch, and who's the guy, Travis from Alabama, who puts
Walton.
himself out there, and they all have the same kind of experiences that they can't even articulate on their TV shows, of this communication that happens in the background, and that they really come to realize that once they put themselves out there as a person who's following this, then the phenomenon does in some form find you. It's flattering, but it's disconcerting at the same time. Flattering because they acknowledge your presence. Disconcerting because you can't always turn it off.
That can be very true. I like it though, for me, because I want to get to know them more and have a relationship with them. I don't need to talk to the I don't need to deal with some of the other past things that I've researched and stuff. The Sasquatch they're the way to go. They're the answers. I think that's where we can get a lot of answers.
One of the things you said before was that, like, what happened to you, Tom? You fell off the map.
Yes, where'd you go, dude?
The answer to that question is because I really felt like I was stuck to a phenomenon that maybe I was in a little bit over my head. And
Why would you say that? Why
I
would
think
you say that?
sometimes you just have to leave it behind and go, I know you guys are out there,
Yeah.
and I respect your power, but I just want to be a happy idiot struggling for the legal tender, as Jackson Brown would say.
You know what? I can say it in another way. Tell me if this is right, because I've been there, I think, where you're talking about, where it's like, oh my gosh, I just want to live like a human. I want the human experience again. Because once you cross that line,
You
forget it.
picked a scab that is all of a sudden like a little bit, oh my God, what have I done here?
Yeah. Yes. Totally get it. Totally get it. Now, when I was around you, you had your last day as a school teacher. That was like your love. That was your thing. And then that's
Yeah.
when you were gone. So how did that go for you? How long did that take for you to really
Well,
kind of pass that?
it was a really interesting transition between Sasquatch as a forbidden subject to one that is absolutely enters the popular culture. In other words, in the early days of my education career, I would show a Leonard Nimoy In Search Of episode that the school district had on a 16 millimeter movie film, and I would use it to keep the kids engaged on the last day before Christmas vacation. But even then, the principal would say, I'm not completely comfortable with you using, showing this stuff
Oh,
as part of a science thing. And I'm like, well, it's a school district approved movie. What the hell? And what am I supposed to do with kids on the last day? Well, a few short years later, I had the parents coming in and saying, no, I want to see the movie.
I
I want to
love
know
it.
about this too. In fact, I ran into a really interesting abductee case by the parents of one of the brightest family of students I've ever seen, and turned out there was a book about her case, and Walter Webb was the author, and it was about a abductee case in Vermont, and this was a mom right there in my neighborhood, and she opened up about her whole story, and I couldn't believe what I was listening to, but she really didn't want me to use her name, but I did make a chapter about her abductee case, and it was actually a book which ended up being one of the most respected pieces of research about the abductee phenomenon, because he was able to find both people who were abducted and so on and so forth. It's an incredibly long story. But it all came to me because I picked the scab, so to speak. In other words, I would present this stuff to the kids for one day, and then very typically parents and uncles and aunts would come to me and say, hey, let me tell you about my story.
Yes.
And I collected an amazing amount of information from my immediate neighborhood that I was in as a school teacher, as a science teacher.
Oh, imagine being on one of the hosts on Coast to Coast and all the stories that come to you. It's excellent. You got plenty of content out there because they're doing the same kind of thing, and you get to hear stories that they're like, hey, you can't tell anybody else, and of course I'm going to keep that word because I want to hear the story, and there's just amazing encounters by people.
Historically, in the 90s, when I was first sort of really getting serious about my research, what I found when I was working for the BFRO, Bigfoot Field Research Organization, is that when you had a spot on Coast to Coast, a huge flood of new information would hit your website as a consequence of that publicity. And so what we came to realize is that there is this very large pent-up source of material which, especially is held by rural folk. And all of a sudden, if you stick your head up, so to speak, and say I recognize the validity of these experiences, then a flood of information would come your way, and by the Monday after, you had more sighting reports to investigate than you had time to undertake.
And then you can write some more books from that and more and more. Tom Powell is also an author. You can check out his books on Amazon. That's Tom, Thom, and Powell, Powell. Stay with us. More from Tom and myself here on Coast to Coast AM.